Galactic Empire offers the deadliest job in the galaxy. A woman general signs up instantly. The galaxy was at war. But that wasn't new. What was new, what had never been seen before, was the offer broadcasted across every comm channel. A message from the Galactic Empire itself. The kind of opportunity that sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened generals. Underscore the deadliest job in the galaxy. The power to command the most elite force ever assembled. One mission. No second chances. Underscore. The words hung in the air, each syllable a promise of chaos, power, and destruction. The Emperor's voice, cold and unwavering, carried the weight of centuries of dominance. The recruitment was clear. Underscore joined the Silent Nightmares, the Empire's most ruthless division, or risk extinction, as the enemy they hunted. Underscore. Kayla Rose watched the broadcast from her command center, her eyes cold, reflecting the stars outside. The offer was no surprise to her. She had been waiting for it. Others might hesitate, weigh the risks, question their fate. Not her. She had earned her place on the battlefield, earned her reputation in blood and fire. And now, the Emperor had extended his hand, offering her the one thing she desired most, control. Her reputation as a leader, a tactician, and a warrior was unmatched. Her victories were celebrated in songs and whispered among the survivors of countless massacres. Her name, a symbol of unyielding discipline, haunted the memories of every enemy who had crossed her path. They called her the ghost of the front lines, for she led her forces with terrifying precision, her strategies as brutal as they were brilliant. Her hand hovered over the comm panel. This was it. The job. The one she had been waiting for. A soft chime signaled an incoming communication, interrupting her thoughts. She tapped the screen, and a figure appeared in front of her. The man's face was grim, his posture rigid. Admiral Iskandar, the Empire's highest-ranking officer, and the one who had come to personally deliver the Emperor's message to her. "General Rose," he began, his voice carrying the weight of an official summons. "You've heard the offer." "I've heard it," Kayla responded, her voice steady, like a predator about to pounce. "We need someone who is willing to do what others won't, to fight where others fear to tread. The Silent Nightmares are the Empire's most elite unit. To command them is not only a privilege, but a death sentence for anyone unworthy. This is a one-way mission, General. No one returns from these assignments." Kayla's lips curled into a grim smile. "I've never been afraid of death." Iskandar's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly, as if measuring her resolve. "Your leadership will be tested. There are no second chances. Failure is not an option." "I'm aware," Kayla replied, her fingers tapping on the table in front of her, each tap echoing through the cold silence of her command center. "You'll be commanding a division that's been called on to wipe out an enemy faction so dangerous, even the Emperor himself is concerned. You'll lead an assault into the heart of their territory. The enemy is ruthless, cunning, and they are not like anything you've faced before." "And what's the pay?" she asked, her tone flat, but there was an edge of amusement behind it. She didn't need a reason to fight. She fought because she was made for it. But that didn't mean she didn't have her standards. A galaxy of riches. Control of the galaxy's most strategic sectors. The power to shape the future of the Empire, Iskandar said, his voice lowering slightly. "But it's not just the glory of victory that awaits you. This mission will change everything." She studied him for a moment. She could see the cracks in his confident exterior, the fear beneath the bravado. Kayla had always been able to see it in people, fear. It was the one thing she knew how to exploit. She didn't hesitate. "I'll do it," she said, her voice like a blade cutting through the tension in the room. The Admiral's eyes briefly flicked to the side, as though he expected her to falter. But when he met her gaze again, there was a hint of respect in his features. "Very well, General. Your orders will follow immediately. Prepare yourself." The comm went silent, and Kayla sat back in her chair, the weight of her decision settling in. She had just signed up for the most dangerous mission in the galaxy, but she was ready. No, she was more than ready. She had fought wars, bled, and lost everything she held dear. What was one more battle? The galaxy would tremble when they saw her take command. The silent nightmares were about to know who their leader truly was. The storm hit with the ferocity of a dying star, ripping through the calm of space as the silent nightmares launched into the unknown. Kayla Rose stood at the helm, the cold, metallic hum of her ship vibrating beneath her feet. The galaxy had seen nothing like this. A team of the Empire's deadliest warriors, forged through years of brutal training and bloodshed, was about to descend on an enemy faction that had never seen the might of the Empire's most elite. But Kayla knew this wasn't just about strategy or tactics. This was personal. This was war at its most primal level. Kayla's hand hovered over the console, the lights dimmed, her fingers poised like a predator preparing to strike. Her ship, the Phantom Fury, was a sleek black shadow among the stars, designed to be as silent as death itself. It had been custom built for her, an extension of her will, a tool for destruction. The crew was already in position, every soldier on board prepared to follow her lead into the heart of the enemy's territory. The mission was simple in its objective: eliminate the leader of the rebel faction and bring their forces to heel. What the Empire hadn't counted on, however, was how this mission would test Kayla in ways that went beyond strategy. Every choice she made from here on out would carve the path not just for her survival, but for the future of the Empire itself. The door to the command room slid open with a soft hiss. One of her lieutenants, Commander Zalen, entered without a word. He was a tall man, his expression grim, yet his eyes betrayed a flicker of excitement. Zalen had fought under Kayla's command for years, and though he was loyal, there was always that spark of doubt in his eyes. Was she truly the leader they needed? Or was she too ruthless to be the savior the Empire claimed her to be? "We've crossed into enemy space," Zalen said, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're minutes away from the target coordinates." Kayla didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on the view outside, the endless black void of space, dotted with distant stars. "Have we confirmed their forces are in position?" she asked, her voice calm, but carrying an edge that made even the most seasoned officer straighten. Zalen hesitated. "Yes, but there's a complication." Kayla's gaze snapped to him, her eyes narrowing. "What complication?" "They've fortified their position. It's more than we anticipated. There's a high probability of encountering heavy resistance once we breach the system." Resistance. Kayla's lips curled into a smile. "Good. Let them come." Her voice was a sharp contrast to the weight of the situation. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't confidence. It was something far darker. Kayla thrived in chaos. She was made for it. Zalen's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. The tension in the room thickened, a silence broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. Moments later, the comms crackled. The voice on the other end was cold, mechanical. "General Rose, we've received intel from the Empire. A significant rebel fleet has mobilized to counter your assault. They are converging on your location. Estimated arrival, 20 minutes. Kayla exhaled a low, almost imperceptible sound that rippled through the air. "Let them come." She turned sharply to face the room. The soldiers under her command weren't just warriors. They were the deadliest the galaxy had ever seen, each one forged in the fires of endless wars. She could see it in their eyes. They were ready for this. No matter the odds. No matter the cost. "You heard the Admiral," Kayla said, her voice now commanding. "This is our one chance to wipe out the leader of the rebellion. We strike fast, we strike hard, and we don't look back. No mercy. Not one." They will know why they feared the silent nightmares. The room was still for a moment as her words sunk in. Her officers exchanged silent glances, but their resolve was clear. There would be no question, no hesitation. They followed her because they knew she was more than a leader. She was an executioner, precise, brutal, and unrelenting. Kayla's gaze shifted back to the view outside. The enemy was closing in, but she was prepared for this. They all were. She had seen worse, far worse, during her time in the front lines. No enemy, no matter how fierce, would stand a chance against her. "Activate the assault pods," Kayla commanded. Her officers moved swiftly, executing their orders with precision. In moments, the ship's hangar doors opened, releasing the pods into the vast emptiness of space. Each pod contained a single soldier, clad in the Empire's finest combat gear, equipped with the best weapons money could buy. They were no ordinary soldiers. They were the silent nightmares. The pods shot towards the enemy stronghold, faster than any traditional ship could travel. The mission had begun. As they descended towards the rebel base, Kayla knew this was where she would prove herself. This was her moment to show the Empire and the galaxy what she was truly capable of. There would be no turning back. The moment Kayla's boots hit the dirt of the enemy planet's surface, everything she had ever known about war changed. The sounds of battle were a familiar symphony. The sharp crack of blaster fire, the roar of explosions, the scream of dying men. But there was something different this time. The air smelled of blood, yes, but also of regret. And for the first time in her career, it wasn't just her enemies who would pay the price. Kayla led her squad through the ruined city, the oppressive weight of enemy fire ricocheting around them. The terrain was a deadly blend of desolation and ruin, a perfect reflection of the rebel faction's brutal tactics. Every building had been converted into a fortress, every street turned into a killing field. They had fortified their position to the extreme, knowing that the silent nightmares were coming for them. But they had no idea what they were truly up against. "Stay sharp," Kayla commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. Her soldiers, disciplined and deadly, moved in perfect synchrony, cutting down any resistance with ruthless efficiency. This was her domain. This was her element. Her lieutenant, Zaylan, jogged up beside her, his face tight with worry. "General, we've breached their outer defenses. But we've detected an anomaly." Kayla's eyes never wavered from the battlefield. "Explain." "They've set up an ambush. There's a second defensive line waiting just ahead. And it's not just soldiers, General. It's something else." Kayla stopped in her tracks, her instincts flaring. "What do you mean, something else?" Zaylan hesitated. "It's a trap, but not just any trap. The leader, it's him. The one we were sent to kill." The words hit Kayla like a physical blow. Him. She knew exactly who Zaylan meant, the leader of the rebel faction. But it wasn't just any leader. It was Jareth Daxon, the man she had once loved, the man she had once trusted with her life, the man who had betrayed her. She had known this mission would bring her face to face with her past, but nothing could have prepared her for this. Not this. Not Jareth. "Set the perimeter," Kayla ordered, her voice betraying no emotion. "We move in 30. As her soldiers spread out and prepared for the next phase of the assault, Kayla stood still, her mind a storm of conflicting emotions. The memories of her time with Jareth came flooding back, his laughter, his promises, the way he had once made her feel invincible. He was the one person who had ever understood her, and she had trusted him with everything. But that trust had been shattered, torn apart by his decision to abandon everything they had fought for, everything they had built together. When she had learned of his defection to the rebels, she had felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under her. He had chosen the enemy over her, over them. "General," Zaylan's voice broke through her thoughts. "We're ready." Kayla nodded, her face now a mask of cold resolve. She couldn't afford to let the past distract her. The mission was everything. There was no room for weakness, not now. Not when the Empire's future was on the line. They moved forward as one, a well-oiled machine, cutting through the enemy defenses with surgical precision. But as they approached the heart of the rebel stronghold, Kayla felt the weight of the past pressed down on her shoulders. Every step brought her closer to Jareth, closer to the man who had once been everything to her, and now, the person she had sworn to destroy. They reached the central command center just as the trap was sprung. The rebels, waiting in the shadows, launched their assault, but Kayla was already prepared. Her soldiers tore through the enemy with brutal efficiency, but Kayla's mind was elsewhere. Her eyes scanned the battlefield, looking for him. Then she saw him. Jareth stood at the far end of the compound, a figure of calm in the chaos. His dark eyes met hers across the carnage, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. He hadn't changed. Not physically. He was still the same man she had once loved, still the same man who had led with a passion that had matched her own. But now, that passion was directed against her, against everything they had fought for. Kayla didn't hesitate. She reached for her blaster, the cold metal comforting in her grip. She raised it to her side and fired, her shot expertly aimed at one of his lieutenants. The man crumpled to the ground, but Jareth didn't flinch. He didn't move. Kayla, his voice cut through the chaos, low and familiar, yet filled with an icy edge. I knew you'd come. I hoped you would. The words stung more than she cared to admit. She had trained herself to hate him, to erase him from her memory, but hearing his voice again, it made the blood in her veins turn cold. Don't speak to me, she spat, the bitterness in her tone sharp enough to cut through the din of battle. You're no longer the man I knew. Jareth's lips curled into a small, sad smile. I never was. And neither are you, Kayla. You've become the very thing you swore to destroy. Her grip on her blaster tightened. She wasn't here to listen to his words. She was here to finish what she had started. To end this. To destroy him. The battle raged on around them, but Kayla didn't move. Her eyes locked onto Jareth's, and for the briefest moment, she wondered if there was a part of her that would always love him, would always want to save him. But the past was gone, and the future was in her hands now. Her next move would decide everything. The explosion rattled the ground beneath Kayla's boots, sending a shockwave of heat and dust into the air. She barely flinched, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The battle was far from over. The rebel stronghold lay in ruins, but the fight had only just begun. And now, Kayla was about to face the one thing even she had never prepared for, a full-on assault from the Empire itself. Kayla stood amidst the chaos, her mind as cold as the steel of her blade. The enemy had been crushed, but the cost had been high. Her soldiers were bloodied, bruised, and battered. The mission was supposed to be a clean operation, a surgical strike to eliminate the rebel leader and secure the planet. But now, she faced a new threat, the very empire she had sworn to serve. The comms crackled in her ear. It was Iskandar, the admiral, his voice cold and detached. General Rose, he began, his tone making it clear that no formalities would be spared. The situation has changed. We've received intel that you have exceeded your mandate. Your actions have drawn unwanted attention. Kayla's grip tightened around the blaster in her hand. I followed the orders I was given. I completed the mission. The mission was to eliminate the leader of the rebellion, not to start a war with the Empire. Iskandar replied sharply. You've gone beyond your authority. We can't afford the kind of instability you've brought down on us. Kayla's heart beat faster, but she didn't let it show. She had known this was coming. The Empire had always been a beast that turned on its own when it saw fit. She was no fool. She had made enemies the moment she stepped into the role of leader of the Silent Nightmares. But now it was personal. I will not stand down, Admiral, she said, her voice low but unwavering. If the Empire wants to make an example of me, then let it. But know this, I will fight until the last breath. A pause followed, thick with tension. Then Iskandar spoke again, the words ringing in her ears. Prepare yourself, General. The Empire is coming for you. And when it does, no one will be able to protect you. The calm went silent. Kayla looked out over the battlefield, her soldiers regrouping, but she could see the unease in their eyes. They were loyal to her. But loyalty only went so far when faced with the full might of the Empire's war machine. She had known this was coming. The Empire was always watching, always calculating. But Kayla wasn't afraid. Fear was for the weak. And she wasn't weak. She turned to Zaylan, who had remained close by, his face tight with concern. Get the men ready, she ordered. We're not backing down. Not now. Not ever. Zaylan nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. General, are you sure about this? The Empire's forces will overwhelm us. We don't have enough men to hold off. We'll make do. Kayla cut him off. We've faced worse before. And we've won. Zaylen didn't argue further, but Kayla could see the worry still etched on his face. As he left to gather the troops, Kayla turned her attention to the sky. The Empire's fleet was already in orbit, a vast armada of ships that dwarfed her own forces. But she knew something most didn't. It wasn't the size of the fleet that mattered. It was how you fought. The battle began in earnest moments later, a thunderous roar from the skies above as the first wave of Imperial dropships hit the ground. Kayla's soldiers scattered, taking positions and setting up defensive lines. She felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the surge of power that came with battle. This was where she thrived. But this time, the stakes were higher. The Empire wasn't just a faceless enemy, it was her own. And she had no intention of bowing down. Her soldiers held their ground, fighting tooth and nail against the Imperial forces. It was chaos, pure and simple. Blaster fire lit up the night, explosions rocked the ground, and the screams of the dying mixed with the relentless thrum of combat. Kayla moved through the battlefield like a shadow, her soldiers following her every command with lethal precision. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had been in countless battles, but this one felt different. The weight of the Empire's betrayal hung over her like a storm cloud, and with every soldier she killed, she wondered how many of them were simply following orders that came from the very Empire she had once pledged her life to. She fought through the night, her focus unyielding. Every battle was the same, and yet every battle was different. Every life she took felt heavier than the last. By dawn, the battlefield was silent, save for the crackling of fires and the occasional distant explosion. Kayla stood over the wreckage of an Imperial shuttle, her chest heaving with exertion. The enemy had retreated for now, but Kayla knew it was only a matter of time before they regrouped and returned with more force. She wiped the blood from her face, her gaze distant. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. The Empire had made a fatal mistake by underestimating her. And Kayla Rose always made those who underestimated her pay the price. The moment Kayla's ship breached the atmosphere, the ground beneath her trembled. But this time, it wasn't just an explosion. This time, it was the force of the Empire's retribution. The air was thick with the promise of annihilation. The silent nightmares had been cornered, but Kayla had one last card to play, and she would play it with the precision of a deadly predator. Kayla stood on the command deck of the Phantom Fury, watching as the Empire's overwhelming fleet loomed just beyond the horizon. The battle had been brutal. The tide was turning in favor of the Empire's reinforcements, but Kayla wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Zaylen entered the deck, his face grim. "General, they're pulling in reinforcements. We're outnumbered. If we don't retreat now—" "No," Kayla cut him off. "We stand our ground. We don't retreat. If we do, it's over. This is our last chance to end it." "But the Empire—" "The Empire?" Kayla's voice was ice cold. "The Empire is the one who started this. The Empire is the one who betrayed me. They think they can crush me like a bug beneath their boot. Let's show them how wrong they are." Zaylen hesitated, but knew better than to argue. She had always been this way, unstoppable, relentless. Her vision had never faltered, even when the odds seemed impossible. Kayla wasn't about to back down, not now, not when the stakes were this high. A sudden explosion rocked the ship, sending a ripple of tension through the crew. Kayla's eyes narrowed. The battle was intensifying. The Imperial forces were closing in, their ships advancing with deadly intent. But Kayla's mind was already racing, calculating, planning the next move. She had no time to waste. "Deploy the assault pods," Kayla ordered, her voice unwavering. "We'll hit them where it hurts." Zaylen gave a quick nod, stepping back to carry out the orders. Within moments, the silent nightmares were in motion. The battlefield outside was chaos, ships engaged in dogfights, explosions lighting up the sky. But Kayla wasn't looking at the battle in space. She was focused on the ground, where the real war would unfold. As the first wave of soldiers stormed down, Kayla followed in their wake, leading the charge. The rebels had made a grave mistake by thinking they could defeat the Empire's finest warriors. But Kayla's squad was different. They didn't just fight to survive, they fought to win, to make a statement. With brutal efficiency, they cut through the enemy lines, the sound of gunfire and the crash of explosions ringing in the air. Every step they took was a calculated move, each soldier working in perfect harmony to dismantle the enemy's defenses. But Kayla's mind was still focused on the bigger picture. This wasn't just a mission. This was a turning point. As she reached the central command center, Kayla saw it. The heart of the enemy's defenses, the nerve center from which the rebel leaders coordinated the fight. It was heavily fortified, but she wasn't about to let that stop her. With a single command, she unleashed the full might of her forces. They tore through the barricades, cutting down any opposition with ruthless precision. In the midst of the chaos, Kayla's eyes found their target. Jareth Daxon. He stood at the center of the command center, watching the battle unfold with cold detachment. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, brief enough for Kayla to feel the weight of everything they had been and everything they had become. This time, she wouldn't hesitate. She had spent years tracking him down, years preparing for this moment. And now, the final reckoning had come. She raised her blaster and fired. The shot rang out, but it wasn't aimed at Jareth. Instead, it hit the control panel beside him, sending a surge of electricity through the system. The lights flickered. The hum of the battle around them seemed to grow louder. But in that moment, Kayla knew what needed to be done. The enemy forces were beginning to crumble, but Kayla wasn't done yet. The rebel faction had one last card to play, an experimental weapon that could turn the tide in their favor. Kayla had to act fast. She couldn't let them launch it. As the seconds ticked away, Kayla and her squad pushed forward, navigating through the wreckage of the command center. With every corner they turned, the sense of urgency grew. They were running out of time. The weapon was just ahead. Kayla could feel it in her bones. This was it. The final push. With a surge of strength, Kayla reached the control panel and disabled the weapon before it could fire. The room went silent. The battle was over. Kayla stood over the wreckage of the command center, breathing heavily, but with a sense of victory. They had won. But the war was far from over. The Empire had made its move, but Kayla knew this was only the beginning. There was still much to be done, and she would do it her way. The silent nightmares had turned the tide, and Kayla Rose wasn't done yet. The moment the first bomb dropped, Kayla knew there was no turning back. The Empire's fleet had returned, their ships filling the sky like a storm of steel and fire. But Kayla wasn't backing down. She had a plan, and it was the only thing standing between victory and total destruction. In this final hour, she would either rise to become a legend or be consumed by the flames of betrayal. Kayla crouched behind a scorched wall, the acrid scent of smoke burning her nostrils. The battlefield had become a wasteland, ruined buildings, smoldering wreckage, and the endless drone of explosions filled the air. The Empire had regrouped, and now they were throwing everything they had at her and her soldiers. But Kayla wasn't intimidated. She had fought worse, and she had survived. "General, we need to retreat." Zalen's voice crackled through her comlink, panic threading his tone. "The Imperial fleet is overwhelming us. We can't win this." Kayla's gaze never wavered from the devastation around her. "We're not retreating," she snapped. "We're not giving them the satisfaction. We fight until the last breath." Zalen hesitated. "But—" "No buts," she cut him off. "Get the men in position. We're going to make them regret underestimating us." The silence that followed was deafening. Zalen knew better than to question her decision. He had seen the results of her tactics before, bloodshed. Yes, but always a victory. And this time, Kayla had a weapon the Empire couldn't anticipate. The element of surprise. Kayla pressed her hand to her ear, her voice a low growl. "Prepare the charge. We're hitting them with everything we've got. No mercy." She didn't wait for confirmation. She didn't need to. Her soldiers were loyal, and they would follow her into hell if she commanded it. With a swift motion, Kayla activated the signal, and a series of explosions rocked the enemy's position. The trap was set. It was time to strike. The first wave of silent nightmares surged forward, charging into the fray like an unstoppable force. blasters blared, explosions erupted in all directions, and the ground shook beneath their feet. But Kayla was already 2 steps ahead. She knew the Empire's weaknesses. She had studied their tactics, their patterns. And now, she would exploit every flaw. "Push forward," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We end this now." Kayla's team moved with deadly precision, cutting down the Empire's soldiers one by one. The rebels fought with everything they had, but they were no match for the well-coordinated fury of the Silent Nightmares. In mere minutes, the battlefield had shifted from one of despair to one of ruthless dominance. But then, Kayla felt it. A shift in the air. The unmistakable hum of something larger, more dangerous. She turned to the sky, her heart pounding. The Imperial flagship had descended, its massive form blotting out the sun. The final weapon in the Empire's arsenal. "You have to be kidding me," Kayla muttered, her eyes narrowing as the flagship's guns powered up. Zalen's voice came through again, more frantic this time. "General, they've got us pinned. The flagship, if it opens fire, we're done." Kayla didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted her hand, signaling her command to move. "Get the anti-ship weapons ready. We'll take it down ourselves." Her soldiers scrambled into position, their actions synchronized with Kayla's every order. The Empire had brought its heaviest guns to the fight. But Kayla wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. The silence of the battlefield was broken only by the hum of the anti-ship cannons powering up. Kayla's fingers trembled as she adjusted the targeting system. This was it. The one shot that could either save them or doom them all. With a sharp inhale, Kayla gave the command. "Fire." The blast tore through the sky, the energy beam lancing toward the Imperial flagship. The ship's shields flared, but they were no match for the intensity of the strike. The shield crackled and then shattered, the blast hitting the flagship with a force that sent it careening to one side. But Kayla wasn't done. She pressed the trigger again. Another shot. This time, the flagship shuddered violently, the hull buckling under the force of the hit. The ship began to break apart, pieces of it tearing away as the core exploded in a brilliant burst of fire. For a moment, silence reigned. And then, the screams of victory. The Empire's fleet was in disarray, its flagship destroyed, its forces scattered. Kayla's soldiers surged forward, pushing through the remnants of the Imperial army. The fight was almost over. Kayla stood tall amidst the wreckage, her chest heaving with exertion. The battle had been won, but she knew this was only the beginning. The Empire had tried to crush her, to silence her. But they had failed. The fire of war still burned in her eyes. She would take this victory and make the Empire regret ever underestimating her. The reign of Kayla Rose had just begun,